Number 10. The Ghost of Christmas Present. From the 90s through the 2000s, Marvel has been publishing a heartwarming Marvel holiday special, the perfect stocking stuffer, if you don't mind your comics rolled up and shoved in like a tube. In 1991, they released the first holiday special, host to a variety of wonderful Christmas stories, including 'Twas a Midwinter's Night, and A Spider Carol, an especially cute one called Ghost of Christmas Present. In that story, a gang of thugs kidnaps a blind 4-year-old boy from a wealthy household on Christmas Eve, hoping to exchange him for ransom money. The boy manages to escape near a graveyard, but one of the thugs finds him and gives him a bloody nose. At this point, Ghost Rider arrives on the scene and takes the thug and his buddies out with a chain. Now, being blind, the boy mistakes Ghost Rider for good old Santa, since his chain sounds like Christmas bells and he's wearing leather boots, which the boy touches. The other thugs show up, remarking how this crazy guy must think it's Halloween, and they threaten to look under his costume. Ghost Rider then treats them all to his penance stare, and afterwards returns the boy to his home. The rider motors off into the night, and the boy mistakes the sounds of his hell cycle for hungry reindeer. It's a nice little holiday heartwarmer that's surprisingly simple and fun.
Number 9. The Silent Night of Batman. And before we move on to our next point, just a reminder to show some of that holiday cheer to us by clicking that like button. It really does help us out, and we also hope you have a great holidays, so like back. We all know how much Batman loves to sing, and if you don't know, you're about to find out in this holiday story. The Silent Night of Batman is a story that appears in issue 219 of Batman. Here, Commissioner Jim Gordon ends up recruiting Batman not to help fight any crime on Christmas Eve, but instead to lend his deep vocals to some Christmas carol singing. Batman agrees because he loves a good carol, but also plans on leaving as soon as the first crime of the night is committed. And this is Gotham, so he's sure that is bound to happen at some point. But weirdly enough, it never does. Instead, we just get little vignettes into some of the kinder moments happening through the city. Even Batman is surprised at the end when he realizes he spent the whole night singing because zero crime was committed that night. It's holiday magic!
Number 8. The Ghost of Christmas. This bit of holiday mayhem is less of a heartwarming tale, as Deadpool tends to massacre everything he comes into contact with, including the Christmas season. This story showcases Deadpool continuing his endless rampage through the Ideaverse, killing beloved literary icons. And the story opens with Deadpool appearing before Ebenezer Scrooge and shooting the crap out of the Ghost of Christmas Future. Deadpool calls him McDuck, referencing the Disney spin on this classic tale, and then just totally blasts him one. It's seriously only the first page. After this, he's off to his next tale, Frankenstein. Deadpool stops to kill creatures from the Jungle Book and from the Little Mermaid. It's not really very festive at all. Everyone dies. Classic Deadpool.
Number 7. Doorman. For some of the weirdest heroes, we can look to the Great Lakes Avengers, who are in general known for being a much more wacky and often eccentric team of heroes whose powers are oddly specific in a way that usually doesn't seem on the surface to be all too useful. Doorman got a power upgrade after his death, but before that his powers weren't really that extraordinary, at least not in how they were presented initially. Also, he was struck with the bizarre name of Doorman, so that probably could have been better. Doorman was so named because he could use his powers to act as a doorway for people, allowing them to pass through solid barriers. This, however, is actually because of Doorman's connection to the Dark Dimension, which he uses to allow people to pass through him, effectively teleporting them through barriers via the Dark Force. His attachment to the Dark Force also gave him a slew of other useful abilities similar to magic or Kitty Pryde. So actually, although Doorman sounds weird, he's actually pretty cool.
Number 6. A miracle a few blocks down from 34th Street. In this story from Marvel, we discover that Santa is actually a mutant. Actually, the most powerful mutant ever, according to Cerebro. The X-Men are trimming the tree in their base when Cerebro alerts them to the presence of an incredibly powerful mutant in Manhattan. Our heroes arrive at Rockefeller Center and meet Santa in the flesh. The man in red also turns the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants into toys and wipes the X-Men's memories of ever having met him. Santa has actually popped up in many other Marvel comics as well, and he's got some serious powers as a mutant, including reality manipulation, immortality, teleportation. He sees you when you're sleeping, he knows when you're awake. He can even manipulate gravity and eat an entire planet's worth of cookies in one night. This is a really nice little story, and I personally really got a kick out of the idea of Santa as a mutant. He should just be a full-time member of the X-Men. or maybe just a seasonal member.
What if the Punisher was a stern yet fatherly type? I feel like it's more gentle, but it's the Punisher, so apparently it's hardcore. This is a little one-page story from What If, but I just enjoy it too much, so I had to share it with you. It shows us a very different kind of Punisher, a less grizzled and frightening Frank Castle, and much more disappointed in you guilt-trip dad version of the anti-hero instead. Still, people telling you that they are disappointed in you, it really sucks. So I can almost imagine this version of Frank as being actually pretty successful, especially given how fragile the egos and emotional states of most villains are. I feel like that punishment that Galactus is given in this story looks also impressively challenging given how large Galactus is and how tiny that piece of chalk is that he has to write with. It makes me think of just metal on a chalkboard, which is I just got chills up my spine thinking of it, both while I was writing this and actually just now as I was saying this. Anytime someone talks about metal or nails on a chalkboard, sorry if I triggered anyone.
Number 4. Down and Out in Forest Hills. In this classic holiday drama, Pete and MJ are evicted from their condo right in the middle of the Christmas season. Pete considers asking a bunch of people he knows if he and MJ could stay with them, as he's kind of ashamed to go and stay with Aunt May after having been on his own for so long. Peter stops by the cemetery to visit Uncle Ben's grave, wishing that he was around so he could ask him for advice. Just then, a burglary in progress nearby is interrupted by a security guard, and the bad guys freak out and take the store's Santa hostage. Spidey jumps on top of their armored car, causing it to crash near the cemetery. One of the thugs comes out and aims his pistol at Spidey, but surprisingly, the mall Santa sneaks up behind him and whacks the robber out with a sack of money. Just knocks him out cold. Changing back into his civilian clothes, Peter notices Aunt May has happened to come by and visit Ben's grave as well. And talking, she reveals that she visits his grave every Christmas. Peter realizes what a fool he's been and accepts Aunt May's offer to let him and MJ stay with her over the holidays. It's a heartwarming and wholesome little story and a great part of Spidey's original run.
Number 3. The Almighty Dollar. The Almighty Dollar is J. Pennington Pennypacker, a minor superhero who appears alongside his fellow heroes on the team, the Happy Campers. They likely get their name from the fact that they all received their powers while attending what Pennypacker thought was a self-esteem camp, but was actually a front for scientists looking to experiment with a device that would grant those exposed to it superpowers. Pennypacker gained the ability to fire pennies from his wrists, which wouldn't be very useful today in Canada, where pennies we don't even make them even anymore, and we all round up our cents. But it was good enough to help him and his fellow campmates rise up and escape their captors, so guess it's not that bad.
Number 2. A Coal in My Stocking. This story comes from DC's New Year's Evil, which was actually just published last year. This story follows Black Adam as he flies deep into the North Pole, defeating some wizards and passing through a mystical door that takes him to an ancient place where he meets a great wizard in red robes named Niklaus. Adam defeats the wizard, who then begs for mercy in exchange for anything Adam wants. He pulls out a map of the world, points to his homeland, and demands that the children of his home receive Christmas gifts this year, saying stockings will be filled, adding that if it must be, he will accept a lump of coal in his own. Black Adam was moved to action by a refugee, a little girl in his home who came from an orphanage in New York City, and she explains Christmas to him, setting the previously mentioned events into motion. It's a wholesome and cute little story and gives Black Adam's character a lovely bit of depth.
Number 1. Lobo Paramilitary Christmas Special. This one takes me back to a very intense holiday themed D&D campaign I played once. I actually really missed that group that I was playing with at the time as well. It even included a friend of mine who I haven't seen or played an RPG with in ages because he's actually in the acclaimed Canadian series Letterkenny, true story. In our campaign, much like in this story, we took on Santa Claus. Basically, we were Lobo. That's right. Lobo's Paramilitary Christmas Special is all about Lobo accepting a contract put out by the jealous Easter Bunny who wants to see Santa Claus and his merry jolly holiday die at the hands of a hired killer. Enter Lobo. Never mind Lobo fighting Santa Claus, this issue also includes a brutally graphic scene where Lobo murders and blows apart a whole army of Santa's elves. Nothing says Merry Christmas like dismemberment. I'm ready for the holidays now. Yay. Number 10. What if the leader decided to buy a hat? This is a short one, but a great one. It comes to us from one of the comedic issues of What If in the '89 series. It's just a panel featuring a what if story where the leader buys a hat. Of course, because it is a comedy issue, the leader buys the most ridiculous hat there is. Technically, 2 hats. Propeller hats. I just love his super serious face. This one literally made me laugh out loud. Number 9. What if the Hulk landed on the peaceful planet that Reed Richards promised? This one is both weird, but is also kinda great. It does a really good job of highlighting the division between Bruce Banner and the Hulk and the difference between these two entities. We're also offered a glimpse into how these two manage to work together though, and at times teach each other and help one another. Instead of landing on Sakaar, Hulk lands on the peaceful planet that Richards had intended for him. The nature on this planet calms Hulk and soothes his soul. He and Banner, however, still have their issues and end up dividing the planet in half. Banner hunts and builds tech in an attempt to escape, but the Hulk finds happiness here and becomes worshipped as a god by a race of sorta cat-like creatures who eventually evolve to become cat people. When Banner learns of this, it's implied that he comes to terms almost with his imprisonment when at the end of the issue we see a version of the Hulk who resembles, or seems to resemble, Bruce a little more than he usually would. Hulk continues to protect the cat people from, well, giant alien snakes? I don't think they were always alien snakes, but that's definitely what they evolved into. Number 8. What if the X-Men had stayed in Asgard? This is an interesting story. Here we see the X-Men split as they decide whether or not to stay in Asgard. Those that would leave are permitted to do so, but those who would stay, like Storm, Magic, Wolfsbane, Karma, Cannonball, Rogue, Nightcrawler, and Cypher, are permitted to do so, to the point that there is actually no New Mutants team in Midgard any longer. Instead, we would have had a new X-Men team and basically no New Mutants, with those who stayed in Asgard finding a different kind of happiness there until they're forced to acknowledge that all of this was somewhat of a sham. These mutants are basically like, well, we could go back, but it's really terrible on Earth because people are really prejudiced towards us, and so we're just gonna chill here. This seems nicer in Asgard. Storm ends up fighting a frog version of Thor, and Magic is forced to take on Enchantress as each battles for power. In the end, Loki is defeated, as is Hela, and everyone who remains alive, which is pretty much all the mutants that chose to stay, live happily ever after in Asgard. What a nice ending. Number 7. A Christmas Underground. This story comes to us from neither Marvel or DC. Instead, I thought I'd feature a story from another awesome publisher, Dark Horse. A Christmas Underground is a story from the Hellboy Christmas Special Collection and tells a peculiar but very compelling story wherein Hellboy is mistaken by a dying woman for Father Christmas and promises to help deliver a small tin box to her missing daughter Annie. The story features talking rats and statues in addition to monsters and an army of the undead. All that good Hellboy strangeness, and sees Hellboy venture below a cemetery in order to find Annie and deliver the box to her. I just love that the big red Hellboy was mistaken for Santa. As weird as it is, it's also like super weirdly fitting. Number 6. What if the Fantastic Four had different superpowers? And kind of random ones at that, although they are explained as to why they make sense. But anyways, we'll get to that in a second. One of the weirdest of these powers being Reed Richards' powers. Each of their transformations in the story just draw more inspiration from their own personality itself, which is why everything is so strange. Which means in this scenario that Reed becomes just a floating disembodied brain with telepathic abilities. He goes by the name of Big Brain and travels throughout the Baxter Building, or its alternate reality equivalent, via a network of tubes that the FF had installed. Here Susan Storm gains powers which allow her to stretch, basically like Mr. Fantastic would have had. Johnny Storm becomes Mandroid, he's a robot, and Ben Grimm becomes Dragonfly. He's got wings. They look like dragon wings. The whole feel for me is more comparable to the awesome strangeness that is DC's Doom Patrol in this issue, which I don't hate because I like Doom Patrol. Number 5. Skin. Skin is part of the Gen X mutants. I know what you're thinking, Amanda, another mutant on this list? Why all the mutants? Well, what can I say? We have a lot of mutant heroes, and a lot of mutants tend to get some of the weirdest powers out there. Also, I just like weird mutants, so I have a lot of weird knowledge about them. It's just how it goes. Skin's power is that he can stretch his skin. He basically has a few feet of extra skin which he can manipulate as need be, giving him some minor shapeshifting abilities as well as enhanced durability. Other than being a little gross, the weird thing about Skin is that his powers don't allow him to stretch his body in general, only his epidermis. His skin is affected when it comes to his powers. His skin also tends to be presented as remaining loose after stretching, so it might stretch well, but it doesn't necessarily have the elasticity, the bounce back that you normally expect when you're talking about skin having, good stretch. Which is usually you're like, skin stretchy, and then it like goes back. No, not in this case. It's unfortunate, I think. But oh well, he's accepted it. I like that. There's also a fun story where Skin actually learned how to like make himself look normal, but it just takes so much energy. He's like, dude, I'm just gonna be like this and it's fine. Which I love. Just love yourself. That's what it's all about. What if the X-Men lost Inferno? AKA, what if Sim and the Soul Sword had simultaneously returned to their accustomed spot in Limbo? Apparently. That's like the secondary question we're given in the story. In this issue, we learn what would have happened if the X-Men lost to Madeline Pryor. In this alternate reality, Sim and Maddie end up as kind of a power couple for a time, with Wolverine as their villainous pet, whom they feed human babies to, which a feral Logan apparently devours with glee. Wow. He doesn't even seem to be able to resist their making him into a monster, which is, strange, but yeah, I guess he's just fine with it. Rachel Summers, Phoenix, who is trapped inside a mannequin, does end up returning, giving the surviving heroes hope after the world is overrun by demons. Although also in this reality, Jean is killed by Madeline, so we don't have any Jean to save us. Wolverine kills Maddie as a reanimated skeleton after she seizes the Phoenix Force for herself, saving the world before he perishes. It's always strange when you have a skeleton Wolverine just killing people. Snicked, snicked. He also manages to kill Kitty before this while he is evil. Which I'm like, Kitty, why didn't you just... Don't let yourself get hit, that's like your whole thing, but okay. This issue ends with Alicia Masters Storm, who is obviously the Human Torch's paramour here, giving birth to a baby in the new world, assisted by Rachel and Doctor Strange. Yay? I love you, baby. What a weird thing to say to your babies. I just feel like it's such a strange... Do mothers say that when their babies are born? I love you, baby. Number 3. How the Gronk Stole Christmas. Why are there just so many bizarre Christmas comics? And why don't comic publishers still make these? Do they still make these? Am I just missing out every year? So many of these are from the 90s, to be honest. And this holiday story from Mighty Thor issue 444 is no exception. Published in 1992. The early 90s were such a weirdly edgy time. Also a time where $5 was a lot to spend on a gift. Remember that? Remember when $5 got you so much stuff? This story from Mighty Thor sees Eric Masterson as Thor take on the Gronk, who, you guessed it, is basically the jacked up version of the Grinch. The beginning of the comic adds that the story is dedicated to Dr. Seuss, acknowledging that yes, the characters featured here are definitely inspired by The Grinch Who Stole Christmas. In this case though, we have the misunderstood Gronk who stole presents. The story also features Cindy Lou and the dog Max, and ends happily when Eric is offered a place at the Avengers mansion and is thrown a surprise holiday party, yay! Where the staff at the comic finish off by wishing everyone a Merry Christmas. I really wish I had a stocking that was big enough for comics. That would be great. Number 2. What if Conan the Barbarian were stranded in the 20th century? If you were around for part 1 of this list, you'll know Conan visited modern day New York once in the What If series. This time around we answer the question, what if he never left? Here Conan gets into more trouble, is arrested instead of leaving, but escapes the law and ends up as a sort of unaware villain. I don't think he knows he's a villain, but he's definitely pretty villainous. He ends up working alongside criminals and returns to Danette, the cab driver he fell in love with previously, in an attempt to impress her with his new clothes and his wealth. She tells him she isn't into this new Conan, who she describes as looking like a pimp. I mean, he does have like a leopard or something on a chain. Leopard? Cheetah? What do we call that animal? What do you call an animal with spots? In the end, this path leads Conan to an epic battle with Captain America, which ends with Cap offering him a place on the Avengers, basically in a weird turn of events. Captain America's like, I respect you. Also, you got some problems. You should join the Avengers. Conan does not accept this offer, but he does ponder it at the end of the issue, as he looks like wistfully out the window in a very tight t-shirt. think he needs a bigger t-shirt. Number 1. What if Thanos changed Galactus into a human being? This issue is just ridiculous good fun. This is the first story featured in the 1989 issue What If No One Was Watching the Watcher. Here we see Thanos decide to punish Galactus, whom he is fighting in an even worse way than by killing him. Instead, Thanos turns Galactus mortal and he appears on Earth with no recollection of who he is, and coincidentally looking a lot like Elvis Presley. He is found by a waitress named Gertrude who takes him in and believes herself that he is an amnesiac Elvis. She educates him on what she thinks is his history and his music, and weirdly enough Galactus also has the ability to sing just like Elvis. Huh? He ends up falling in love with music and starts playing and gaining prominence as people believe he is the real king returned from the supposed dead. He even refuses to return to his life as a god when Adam Warlock finds him and reveals the truth about his history. That's just how much Galactus loves music and his new life with Gertrude and her son. I love it. Number 10. Angela. Angela is just confusing when it comes to her history. She was basically retconned into being Thor's sister, but originally was not even part of the Marvel world and was a character from Spawn. Neil Gaiman and Todd McFarlane both created her together, but the two ended up in a legal battle over the rights to the character, which Gaiman won. Neil Gaiman then sold her rights to Marvel. Angela is a half-angel who it later turned out was Thor's half-sister, but who had not known of her true heritage, nor had her parents Odin and Freya known of her survival, believing that she died as a baby. In honor of Neil Gaiman, Marvel also had an alternate version of her become the main character of a follow-up Secret Wars 1602 Angela the Witch Hunter, which makes sense considering that Neil Gaiman himself made the 1602 reality. Number 9. Groot. He might not seem weird now that he's an MCU success story, becoming famous alongside his fellow weirdo hero team in the Guardians of the Galaxy movie, but when you think about it, Groot is a pretty strange character. He's basically a sentient tree who can move around and only speak 3 words. I am Groot. Though even more bizarrely through these 3 words, he seems to be speaking a whole other language. Initially, Groot wasn't even a hero. When he first was introduced in the 1960s, he was an alien tree invader seeking to experiment on the human race. However, in the 2000s, he would end up becoming repurposed like other members of the MCU Guardians team and end up becoming known as one of the heroes. So his whole history is actually pretty weird too. Now it's been retconned that his original appearance wasn't even him, but another Groot. He could also communicate using more than 3 words in that original appearance. And before we move on to this next spot, if you love Groot as much as I love Groot, as much as we all love Groot, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help. Number 8. Eye-Boy. He's got a higher level perception cause he's covered in eyeballs. It's Eye-Boy. Eye-Boy might seem like a strange mutant and hero, but I cannot deny that I downright love him. Even though, yeah, he's kind of a weird one to look at and to have thought up, I guess. Eye-Boy has since been revealed to have more than just enhanced vision though. He can see things that others can't, basically seeing through to other planes at times, and also seeing and understanding the world around him on an atomic or microscopic level due to his inhuman level of sight. It's a pretty specific power, but it actually can be super useful given the right circumstance. Number 7. What if Peter Parker had become Nova? In issue 15 of the 1977 What If series, it gives us a glimpse into 4 other options for Nova's true identity. One such option posed in these alternate storylines is Peter Parker. Here we see Peter become one of the most depressing characters when he is bitten by a radioactive spider that has absorbed a higher dose of radiation than the one on our world, or the Earth of 616. I mean, 616 isn't really our world. I don't know, do you guys think we live on 616? I think we actually have a categorization for this world. Meaning that instead of giving Peter powers, he loses the ability to control his legs, becoming paralyzed from the waist down. The shock of this accident also kills Aunt May, and Peter basically becomes the biggest sourpuss, blaming himself for everything, including the death of his aunt, and pushing everyone away from him. He refuses even to enjoy Festival Eve. Come on, Peter, everyone enjoys Festival Eve. What is Festival Eve though? In the end, an Emerald Ray grants him the powers of Nova, healing him. Amazed, he immediately heads to his uncle for advice and interrupts a burglar breaking into his Uncle Ben's home. He kills the burglar accidentally while attempting to protect his uncle, and only becomes more depressed at the fact that he killed someone, refusing to be Nova, and once again blaming himself for pretty much every tragedy he has suffered or encountered in his life. This is very harsh, Peter. Like, I know Peter is normally a character who beats himself up a lot, but this is a lot even for Peter Parker. Number 6. Frogman. Frogman is Eugene Patillo, who set out to redeem his father's name and repurpose his villainous persona, Leapfrog, into something heroic. Instead of being Leapfrog, Eugene then became Frogman. The suit he wears contains electrically powered spring coils which allow him to leap higher than average heights, though not anything crazy, no leaping tall buildings in a single bound or anything like that. Frogman had to team up with the pretty reluctant Spider-Man and in the end even managed to stop a villain, albeit accidentally. This bolstered his confidence and he has since tried to pursue a life as a heroic vigilante, though many of his successes have less to do with any skills and really more to do with luck. Number 5. The Punisher Red Xmas. See, I'm not the only one who says Xmas. Frank Castle is right there with me. He's got me. I don't know why, but for some reason every time I say Xmas to people they tell me it's like not a thing. So yeah, if you're also out there and you say it too, let me know in the comments. This comic story comes to us from Marvel and starts off throwing us into a violent kind of weird within the first page. But what else would you expect from the Punisher? Here we see Santa gun down some criminals seemingly for not donating to the poor and for not believing in Santa Claus. Of course, we later discover that this was none other than Frank Castle in disguise, awaiting his moment of justice. The huge and glaring problem is that Frank gunned these men down in the streets, out in the open, dressed as freaking Santa, which means a child who happens to witness this grisly scene immediately after clutches to their mother, looking horrified and asking, why? That kid is definitely traumatized now for life. Good job, Punisher. Number 4. Maggot. Maggot is one of the weirdest mutants out there, although strangely enough, he isn't weird because he's not powerful. He actually can be pretty powerful. He's got power, but from a bizarre source. Maggot has 2 sentient maggots who live inside his digestive tract named Eenie and Meanie, but who can painfully leave his body via his stomach in order to go eat pretty much anything in our world, and after doing so and returning to Maggot's stomach, pass on this nourishment and energy to him, enhancing his strength and his durability. His maggots can also potentially be used like kind of weird attack dogs, where Maggot could, in theory, threaten to devour those who get in his way, although it wouldn't be very heroic of him to do so, of course. I can't help it. Every time I'm thinking of powers, I'm like, what is a villainous way that you could use this which would be so good? That's where my mind goes. Number 3. What if the Fantastic Four all had the same power as Human Torch? This is a weird and depressing story that is one of 4 different stories included in an issue that asks the question, what if the Fantastic Four all had the same power? The answer when it comes to the Human Torch's power is that the FF gets reckless and basically endangers human lives. In this story we see the Flame-On family accidentally set a building on fire while fighting, a building that happened to have a woman's baby inside named Angel, while she was working at a cafe across the street. Don't worry, she had a sitter, the baby wasn't alone or anything, but still. It's not good. The FF realizes too late that the building has caught fire. They're able to save some people, but they can't save the baby, and the story ends tragically there. So I guess them all having flame powers would not be good. We shouldn't do that in the main continuity. It'd be sad. Number 2. Dupe. Unsurprisingly, yes, a lot of our weird heroes are going to come from the mutant side of things and the X-Men team. Although I don't know if it's ever actually been cemented exactly really what Dupe is at all, never mind if he's truly a mutant. Dupe has to be one of the weirdest characters of all time, especially when it comes to his storylines. Dupe is also weirdly romantic for a floating green alien language speaking creature that was possibly created by the government as a result of an experiment. Why is he on the X-Men again? Yet also, despite this origins, he somehow has a mother. Dupe has been seen having romantic relationships with other characters like Warbird, and even at one point proposed to Kitty Pryde. Kitty did not marry him, just so you know. Number 1. Phone Ranger. The Phone Ranger is about as weird as he sounds. Armed with alien space tech that can tap into any communication technology, A.G. Bell, the phone repairman, decided to become a superhero. While he may be a ridiculous looking product of the 1980s, Phone Ranger actually also comes equipped with a bunch of communications technology, which also allows him to utilize and integrate with any other comms tech that he comes across. Basically, he's like a spokesperson for phone tapping, trying to make the whole idea of it seem more heroic. Needless to say, Phone Ranger has only been featured in a few issues of Marvel Comics overall, and hasn't been seen since the first superhero Civil War, and I don't think we'll be seeing him anytime soon. But maybe, I don't know. Who wants to write a Phone Ranger series out there? Any writers interested in that?